Grammar Screencast CLC 21 2018 version. In this Grammar Screencast, we shall be covering present participles, a review from Chapter 20, adding perfect participles, talking about the elaborated circumstance clause, as well as talking about adjectives and adverbs. And then we'll finish up with ab plus ablative agent phrases with passive verbs. So let's start. This is from chapter 20. You're dealing with the present participle. The present participle active is only going to occur in two termination adjective like omnis, omne, which of course is like 3i, 3i neuter. For the most part, except that e ablative. But for the most part, rather straightforward. It's going to be a verb acting like an adjective, modifying a noun. It only has one aspect, which is progressive, ing, and active voice. There are no tenses in the participle. Only the indicative has tense. Why is it called present participle? It's formed off the present stem. So what does it look like when we look at it? We saw it in the translation. There's a nice nominative singular, kakenans. It's modifying architectus. The proper term is that's its antecedent, agreeing in gender, number, case. And it signifies progressive voice, progressive aspect, no tense, active voice, no mood, laughing, eating, watching. So present participle, rather straightforward. Perfect participle, passive, it's a little different. It's formed off of our good old magna, us, first, second neuter declensions. It is a participle, which means it's a verb form. It looks a lot like the perfect indicative, except it's a little different. Instead of M long I-S, it's M-I-S-S. It's found in the glossary as the fourth principal part. It will have some similarities to the perfect, but it is unique. It is going to signify perfective aspect, having, and it's going to be passive. In English, we signify the passive with the be verb, having been sent. What is the difference between active and passive? Active voice is what we've covered in Latin so far. The subject does the verb. Passive voice, the subject is done to by the verb. The subject receives the action. So, was eaten. It's that be verb with it. So, active, the subject is doing the action. Passive, the subject is being acted upon or receiving the action. Alex wrote the essay on Alzheimer's. Subject, Alex, doing the writing. Passive voice, the essay on Alzheimer's was written, there's that be verb in English, by Alex. So what's being written? The subject phrase receives the action, doesn't do the action. That's the passive voice. Or a phone call was made by Adam. Verb was made. You can tell it's that be verb there. Adam made a phone call, active. The footballs will be kicked by the boys. Will is the future signal. But be in English tells you it's the passive. The subject is receiving the kicking. The boys will kick the footballs. That's active voice. Every verb we've covered in Latin so far until this chapter has been active. Now we add the passive with the perfect participle. Laudatus. Perfect participle, passive, nominative masculine singular, agreeing with faber. The craftsman having been praised. So when you analyze it, it's perfective aspect, having, no tense, passive voice, no mood, having been praised. All right, so what does this signify? Let's talk a little bit more about the circumstance clause. Remember, every time you have a verb, you have a clause. A circumstance clause is a clause where the entire thing acts like an adjective. It modifies a noun. It agrees in gender, number, case. A clause, it's a verb, it's a participle. You have to have the participle with it. So the young man, we have a participle right here, kelatam, accusative feminine singular, agreeing with pecuniam, having been hidden or hidden, you could also say on the ground. Not the young man, but the money. The architect derided the craftsman, and then you have the participle deiectum, signifying the circumstance clause, having been thrown into the bath. So the circumstance clause, like all clauses, are the verb and everything with it, all the nouns and prepositions and adverbs and all that other stuff with it. So let's start with the participle, vituperatus. Perfective, perfect participle, passive, modifying faber, having been cursed. Who was cursed? The craftsman, because it's modifying it in gender number case. So let's compare the two participles. The present participle signifies present participle active. That's the form. Next line, progressive aspect, not PV, but PG. Tense, no tense, voice active. The perfect participle, so translating it, sending. The perfect participle passive is perfective aspect, no tense, passive voice. Having is the perfective, been is the passive. Let's check for understanding. So the haruspex a cephalo exicitatus invitus electos or exit. So we have a participle, it's highlighted. It's nominative, masculine, singular, agreeing with haruspex. So the haruspex, perfect passive participle, having, so it's clearly not C. Having awakened is active, but when you add the be verb, you deal with passive. So it's having been awakened or having been awoke. Let's talk about adjectives and the superlatives, which we covered in chapter 8. You have the present, you have the normal positive stem, plus the infix isim, plus the endings a, us, following like magna, us, That's why the nouns are the foundational stones for Latin. So we have the positive adjectives here. Some are 3 termination, some are 2 termination, like omnis. Generally speaking, you can add an e to indicate the adverb. Ter, sometimes for the 3rd declension, then you have the irregulars. Those are the adverbs. Now the adjective is formed by the isim, as we talked about. What do you think the the superlative adverb would look like? That's right. The superlative adjective stem with the E ending all the way through with the long E. So the superlative adverb, very easy to spot. Very long time, most often. All right, let's talk about superlative adverbs. Can have one more than one meaning. It could be most slowly or very slowly. Whatever it is, it's the superlative. But you can add a quam with that adverb to create the superlative. As blank as possible. The letter carrier ran as quickly as possible. So it's what's the term? AF as F. It's the similar idea. So the tabularius ran as quickly as possible. Superlative. All right. So very briefly. So we're dealing with an adverb. Now, obviously, A isn't possible. C isn't possible, so it's either B or D. Adverb is signified by the E. That's correct. All right, moving on. Ab plus ablative agent phrase. The ab plus ablative agent phrase is going to indicate passive voice. So therefore, you have exquisite, that's just a normal active. You have quintus departed. But now we have this circumstance clause. A perfect participle passive should be nominative singular, signifying perfective passive, having been sent. And then ab plus the ablative, generally speaking, a separation phrase from, but with a passive verb, it creates an agent phrase. So there's your circumstance clause. Outside, dependent on the main clause. Quintus, having been sent by cogidubnus. So always go to the verb first. That'll tell you if you need a separation translation or an agent translation. Agent indicates that's who's doing the action. For example, the slaves, perfect participle, having been summoned. Who summoned them? By the architect. So the agent phrase tells who's doing the participle. Well, that takes care of all the grammar you need for CLC 21. Make sure you have a question